Last summer, I researched and wrote a piece about a Tunisian flatbread called Mlewi, and I shot this footage but never used it. Mlewi are made with semolina, and when done right, which I certainly do not claim to have accomplished here, hence the long unused footage, they have some layers to them, from being coated in olive oil and folded over multiple times, then rolled out and baked on a griddle. Those good flaky flatbreads are often eaten simply dipped in olive oil and drizzled with honey. But they are also frequently made into wraps, and if you have some familiarity with other Tunisian sandwiches, you've probably seen any number of videos about casse-croûte or fricassee. Then you may be able to predict what they like to put into those wraps. Tunisian tastes are remarkably consistent, and like those other sandwiches, the ingredients most common to these wraps resemble a spicy version of the French pain bagnat: tuna and olives, boiled eggs and fried potatoes, salads, and a spicy North African chili paste called harissa. But one of the recipes stood out to me for another ingredient, a spreadable wedge of cheese called Laughing Cow. And a memory came to me of a man I hadn't thought about in decades. When we were younger, technically adults, but still quite young to my middle-aged mind, my friends Beth and Kevin and I spent many a Sunday evening hanging out with Kevin's parents, getting high and watching Star Trek, as you do with your friends' parents, I'm sure. Kevin's stepfather was a Lebanese man named Yusuf, though we just called him Joe. Joe had his moments of darkness, but my main memories of him are of an easygoing man who laughed a lot. But the memory that came to me in that moment was of a favorite snack of his. Joe would buy flour tortillas that reminded him of the flatbreads of home, and he'd spread Laughing Cow cheese on them and nibble on these roll-ups between meals. If you saw my recent video about the cheese and olive sandwiches I eat for breakfast every day, you may be wondering if this is when I started that habit, and it is. But in an eerie coincidence, Beth reached out to me 2 days later to let me know that Yusuf had passed away. I googled his name to confirm, and he had died a few weeks previous. It's odd how someone who you haven't thought about in decades can pop into your head seemingly at random, and downright unsettling when you receive such terrible news about that person a short time later. But the world is weird, and stranger things happen every day. At the time, I wrote this: I am not crushed by Joe's passing. The friendship we had much earlier in my life was not a deep and abiding one. I'm glad to have known him, but I don't need to hold every person I ever meet close to my heart for all time. But I am sad he's gone, and my heart goes out to those who loved him. And this much is certain: every time I eat Laughing Cow cheese, I'll think of Joe. Now, I've eaten a lot of that cheese since then, and I can't say I've thought about Joe every time. But I have thought about him more in the past 6 months than I had for almost 30 years before that. Anyway, tomorrow's the day, and this is probably the last video I'll ever post on TikTok. Godspeed, friends, and remember Warren Zevon's advice: enjoy every sandwich.